Hello, guys, and welcome back to another Villa Park podcast. It's going to be a good one today. As you guys all know, if you've regular listeners, if you've been with us before, you'll know that I'm quite keen on integration of young players, and we thought just before the season starts, no one better to talk to about that than the expert on the Villa Academy. So, with no further ado, let me add in Charlie, who is on Twitter, the Villa Academy page. I'm sure a lot of you will have seen it. Charlie likes to retain his anonymity, so there's no video of him today, but I'm sure we'll be able to do all right just the same. Hi, Charlie, mate. How are you?
All good, thanks. Just happy to be on. Happy to discuss some of the players that we've been seeing in action yesterday, and some of the other players who I've been watching over the past couple of seasons, and seeing them progress and discussing with you what the future might look like for them.
Yeah, cool. We're about 10 minutes late because Charlie and I were finishing up watching Wimbledon. Before we go on to the football, what do you reckon to the tennis, Charlie? Good match?
Yeah, ridiculous to watch. But one of the funny things I was thinking just as I came off to come on is Carlos Alcaraz is 20. And I was thinking about some of the players that we're going to be talking about, and they're such a similar age. And they're relatively at the start of their careers, and Alcaraz is already reaching such a major point in his career, being a consistent, world number one, Grand Slam winner. It's kind of incredible to think about the difference, really, when it's an individual sport compared to a team sport with such different dynamics.
Well, it's really funny in the interview that they did with just before they started interviewing Djokovic. They started talking about it as like a changing of the guard, and the way that it happened before with Roger Federer and Pete Sampras. So maybe we'll get into talking about a change of the guard in some of the positions in the Villa lineup. Before we get on to the sort of specific, the players and stuff like that, I've always found it really interesting because I'll be completely honest, this is a fact-finding mission for me because I don't, apart from following you on Twitter, I don't really focus on the academy too much. I'm always just sort of absorbed with the first team. How did you get into following the youth players and sort of start your page on Twitter, and where does that sort of interest in the youth teams come from?
I think the main thing is born out of interest. I think even when I was a little bit younger, I'm in my 20s now, but when I was 11, 12, 13, I was always a bit interested in seeing what the reserve scores were. When you'd get a programme at Villa Park, the little section at the back of the programme that talked about the results, and you'd see the under-18 scores, and you'd see the scorers and the names of the peoples to follow. And that's just sort of grown with me. One of the things I've talked about before on other podcasts and in tweets is just that almost slight satisfaction that comes from if Villa aren't playing on a Saturday and you're watching Soccer Saturday and you see the video printer roll through with goal scorers and you're like, for example, Harvey Nibbs has scored or someone like that, and it's kind of satisfying in a way to have tracked that player for such a long time into the point where they're having this professional football career, and it's something that's always sort of stayed with me from the days of watching Barry Bannon for the reserves and the Next Gen series win and things like that, and really sort of tracking those players into their professional careers. And now that's obviously transferred into following more specifically the academy accounts and providing the coverage that I think people deserve to get of the academy that the club doesn't really provide. I mean, not as though I do something amazing, but but even the small bits of information that I can provide, I think, are more than what the club does. And I think that was the main motivation initially when I started the account, is I want to give the players the sense that they're doing something. Some of these players won't go on to have professional careers. That, unfortunately, is just one of the facts of academy football. And I think one of the things that sort of gives me a bit of motivation in my head is that I'm giving these players something that they can sort of store and come back to, whether that be a goal in a good FA Youth Cup win, or getting to the Premier League Under-18 Cup final last season, and those little things where they can store that and keep that with them. Obviously, the bigger side of that is giving people the lowdown and giving my opinions on who will be the next person to break through, who's going to be the next player to make a breakthrough into the first team, and that's probably something that we'll come on to a little bit today.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just say this: you say you're now in your 20s. I put good money on you being the youngest person to have ever appeared on the pod, because we're all a bunch of old fogies who are normally on here anyway. But yeah, I think you bang on. I mean, you talk about the sort of progression of these kids. You know, they're in the limelight, they're in these youth teams. How many of them will actually go on to play at like a good level? I'm seeing today, and I'm sure we'll get onto it in a little bit, about Brad Young had a trial at a League One club and was training there, and he wasn't offered a contract. And you know, you just think, you know, they all seem so dead set. Oh, they're playing in the Villa Academy, they'll end up at a Championship club or a Premier League club or something like that. And it's not always the case. So yeah, I'm a big fan of what you do, and I really like your page. One of the reasons that I sort of reached out and thought it'd be good to have this conversation is because I think you're right. I don't think there's a lot of output from the club about youth players, and I think there's actually loads of interest in it, because if you think of like the favorite or the fan favorite at every club, it's generally someone who's come up through the ranks. You know, at Tottenham it's Harry Kane, at Arsenal it's Bukayo Saka, at Villa it was Jack Grealish, now it's Jacob Ramsey. And you know, fans love the one of their own, that kind of player. And I think that year, the COVID year, when we played Liverpool, I don't know what it was, in the FA Cup or the Carling Cup, whatever it's called now, the Carabao Cup, and we played the kids, and Louie Barry got that goal, and it was just, you know, I think moments like that, I think Villa fans were so up for that game because the kids were playing and backed them so much more than I think they would have done just with a normal first team, because of what it means to have players that come up through your academy. How do you feel in terms of, you know, watching players like Jack come through the academy, watching Jacob Ramsey, who's now part of, you know, solidified his place in the first team? How do you sort of feel with those kind of players? Do you feel more of an attachment to the youth players, or is it just whoever's doing well at the time?
I think you're exactly right. It is an attachment, and I think it's an attachment that every fan kind of craves with the player. One of the big things is just that sense of connection to somebody, and although you can create that with a player that's coming in from elsewhere, and obviously you see that with whether you're talking about Ollie Watkins or Emi Martinez, for example, you create that bond. But I think when a player comes through and has spent their childhood with the club, has grown up in the area, I think it just adds that different dynamic to the connection that you have. Jacob Ramsey is the prime example. Jacob Ramsey grew up in Great Bar. He grew up not far away from me, and went to the same school as my brother. And it's just insane to have those little connections that are, it's almost not something to boast about to other fans, but it's something that you sort of keep in your head to yourself. And then I think the other bit is adding in that sort of sense of local pride. You mentioned Bukayo Saka at Arsenal, and Arsenal are one of the champions of their area, and they love to talk about owning a particular part of North London, for example, and players coming through from that area have this tag, and they have this almost instant bond where you almost don't have to win over the fans. The fans will already love you. And that's another aspect of my sort of admiration for academy football. He's sort of tracking the players who come from areas not far away from you and things like that, knowing that somebody comes from 10 minutes down the road. And
you know, I almost forgot we were in a podcast. I was gonna say to you, what school did your brother go to? What area, Jack? I completely forgot. Always turns into a chat these two, and I forgot that, you know, that we're on camera and recording. But I think you bang on. You know, it's always nice to see. For example, I went to school with because I sort of was born and raised in Birmingham, but I grew up in North London in my teens, and I went to school with a guy called Jay Clivermore, who ended up playing first team for Spurs and for England, and then for a long time for West Brom. And he was sort of 2 years above me, but he didn't just go to school with me; he was also my neighbour as well. And because I was so familiar with him on a personal level, you know, I had such a vested interest in his career, and I feel like, you know, if you've got, even if it's a bit far removed, you know, your brother's mates went to school with, you kind of like find that attachment. I've got, you know, for example, my brother-in-law, he's got one of his mates is good mates with Ben White, and we always kind of have that, you know, that kind of following Ben White, even though I think he's a bit of a knobhead actually, but in general, we do tend to track his career from when he was at Leeds and Brighton and stuff like that. So I'm with you, but I think, I mean, I personally think we have to start with the game yesterday at Walsall. You know, there were a lot of youth academy players on show. I think for the ones that started were Philip Marshall, Josh Feeney, Tim Iroegbunum, Ramsey, Jayden Philippine, to name a few. So, firstly, did you catch the game? And if so, what did you think of the starting players and how they got on?
So yeah, that's turned into one of my main motivations to go to that annual Walsall game. Is, generally speaking, you'll see maybe 2/3 of the squad made up of academy players, particularly yesterday with it being the first week back in pre-season. So yeah, a relatively late decision to go down, I think, and yeah, it's really enjoyable. I think one of the aspects of that I really enjoy is that you don't often see in public the connection between first team players and academy players, and you don't get to see, for example, Aaron Ramsey play with Luca Dean behind him, or Jayden Philippine playing with Matty Cash behind him, and that extra dynamic is something really to be interested in, because I think sometimes some of the drawbacks to their game come from perhaps not having a trust or somebody a little bit less developed in their career alongside them in their role. Thinking about the players yesterday, what better place to start than somebody who comes from Great Bar, Tim Iroegbunum. I think he was probably the sort of standout yesterday in that first half, and obviously he was removed at half time. I think people that know me personally know how much I love his play style, and love how his profile would suit our team at the moment. Whether that will pan out to be the case remains to be seen. But yeah, I think what we saw yesterday is almost a bit of a showcase of the things Tim Iroegbunum is good at, and that's receiving the ball, having that strength, that sort of presence to retain the ball in a pressure situation. There were a couple of runs in the first 15 minutes that are typical of what he does day to day. I think that sort of plays into what I was saying initially as well, is that you see him alongside Douglas Luiz, and it's a different kettle of fish to watching him play alongside somebody at QPR. With all due respect, they're not in the same ballpark of midfielder as Douglas Luiz is, and it's nice to see them link up, and you can see even in small bits the trust Douglas Luiz has in Tim Iroegbunum to retain possession and move possession effectively. I was really impressed with him. Obviously, there's only so much you can take from it. We're playing against a League Two team, and it's the first week of pre-season, so the intensity is low. But I liked what I saw from Tim yesterday. Yeah,
I think he's one that we've had a lot of questions about, and we're going to get onto him in a bit more detail, and it's his place at Villa in the future. What about Philippine? Obviously won the penalty that Ollie Watkins took, and from the looks of it, Ollie Watkins has been working on his penalties. Obviously had that miss against Liverpool towards the end of the season last year. You know, if he'd have got that, possibly we'd be talking about a Europa League charge as opposed to not that anyone's got any issue with the Conference League and the performance from last season, but it's definitely something that you can see he's been working on. But all won and sort of created by Philippine Days. What did you make to him after his he's been at Cardiff, right, for the last season?
Yeah, and funnily enough, I thought it was a nice introduction back to Villa. In the I think late in the season at Cardiff, he won 2 penalties that were both missed, and I thought that was a nice, almost sort of poetic introduction that he'd come back, win a penalty, and Watkins would score it. I think, if I'm being completely honest, it wasn't an organs blazing performance from him. It was relatively quiet first half an hour until he got a couple of chances to move the ball, and that's where you see Jayden Philippine come alive. Is when he has the ball, he has the opportunity to run at his defender, create space. If there's an overlapping run, find that overlapper, and that's what we saw yesterday. He has that real, almost uncoachable skill to his game in that he finds a way past his defender.
He's a strange one for the Gimbadees, because I remember when he first broke through. I think was it Dean Smith who sort of gave him his first appearance, and I remember everyone being so excited about him, clamouring to have him on the bench, and I think he was out of sight, out of mind for so long, and I think Villa have had quite a few of these players who are really supposed to make their way into the first team, and everyone has a lot of high hopes for them, and then they kind of one way or another fizzle out, whether that's, and I think as fans, we're always kind of clamouring for, like I say, for that homegrown talent to be introduced into the team, and we want that kid that's cost us nothing to go out and do his part and do bits in a Villa shirt. Philippine Days, obviously, like I say, he's been on loan. He's been out of sight, out of mind. Everyone just sort of assumed he was going to be sent off again. Do you reckon that his performance yesterday is an indicator of anything, or you don't want to read too much into it? Just a pre-season game against Walsall.
I think one of the things to always keep in mind when we're talking about academy progression into first team is how realistic it is, and the realistic, unfortunate truth is that Jayden Philippine is playing in a position that Villa are actively looking to recruit. We're seeing links every single day to a new right winger, and I think that would probably suggest where the future lies for Jayden Philippine, unfortunately, and that, if anything, makes what he is doing now all the more important. Is show the coaching team what you can do. I think he's had a couple of interesting loan moves. Obviously, he was at Stoke the season before last, and again, he's not really playing the traditional role that we would expect him to play. He was used perhaps a little bit more defensively there, and then later on in that move at Stoke, they moved him into a bit more of a forward position. At Cardiff, again, another interesting season, because Cardiff don't stereotypically play the most attacking football, and so there were times in the early part of the season before a managerial change where Jayden Philippine was to a certain degree playing right back or right wing back, and you don't really get the best of him from that position. When Sabri Lamouchi came in at Cardiff, there was still some games where he would float about in the right wing position, but when that managerial change was made, it seemed to have a big impact on perhaps the freedom he was allowed to work within the final third, and that's when we saw the best come from him. That's when he started providing goals and assists, and getting into the box and winning free kicks and penalties.
Yeah,
he's at the age now that I'd probably think of as the crossroads age, in that he needs to be playing first team football. He can't be playing under 21s football anymore. Unfortunately, he's too good to play under 21s football. And if that means that he's not going to make it at Villa, then I think we might see talk of a permanent move somewhere else, whether that be to perhaps someone lower down. It might be someone on the continent. There's been perennial links throughout his time with Villa to clubs in the Bundesliga. I think I've seen talk before of Eredivisie interest in Jayden Philippine. But then also with him having shown what he can do in the Championship, there's no reason Championship clubs wouldn't be interested in what he has to offer. And as someone who could probably play that second striker position and has done at times for Cardiff and Stoke, and has the maturity that he has developed from playing right wing back in quite organised defences, I think that shows a talent that perhaps people wouldn't expect him to have. Because I think when you come in as a winger who's renowned for getting past his man, you're perhaps perceived to not have the most defensive responsibility. For example, you think that maybe to someone like Adama Traore when he first came onto the scene at Villa. There was always this perception that amazing when you get him the ball in the final third, but is he as committed defensively? And that makes me...
He reminds me of Callum O'Hare. Callum O'Hare was a player that I've really, really liked. I know that they play different positions. Callum O'Hare kind of plays in more centrally now for Coventry, from what I've seen of him anyway. But he was a player who I always really rated. Whenever I saw him play, I was always sort of very excited for him. And then he kind of got that permanent move to Coventry. And every single time I've seen him since, I think that the big fear as Villa fans is having a player who you get rid of. You feel like there's no place for them in your team, and then they go on to success. I think that's even worse than having a player who you keep and doesn't work out, and maybe gets a big contract and stays at the club for a long time. And you want to shift them. What's worse is having a player like, for example, I know Callum O'Hare's only doing it in the Championship, but he's very well liked at Coventry, very highly rated, and you don't ever want to miss out on that kind of talent. Man City did it with Jadon Sancho. Chelsea did it with Kevin De Bruyne. Obviously, I know he wasn't an academy talent, but he was a young player that, be, in my opinion, the best midfielder in Premier League history. So, how do you feel like Villa avoid that? Is that just the setup of the youth academy now? Is it just so well organised that people that we're identifying the talent beforehand? Do you reckon that Emery's, I know you probably may not know this stuff in depth, in the inner workings of the youth academy, but do you reckon like Emery is fully aware of everyone who's coming through the academy and looking at them?
I think absolutely. I think you see from the clips that we see of Emery in training and the way he comes across in press conferences and interviews is that he doesn't leave any stone unturned. I have no doubt that he has a knowledge of who's coming through, who is the next person through in each position, and who will be looking at coming through into the first team. I think the problem that you mention is not actually specific to Villa. The sort of fear of losing a player. It's a problem in football is that you really need a particular set of circumstances. You need a look to be able to break through at the team that you have come through the academy at. If you think back to when Jacob Ramsey made his debut in the Championship, that only came about due to a bit of an injury crisis, and they needed numbers for training. And so it's really sometimes just a peculiar set of circumstances that lead to a player getting an opportunity. And again, unfortunately, sometimes the harsh reality of men's football is that opportunity doesn't come at the club that develops you. And that I think if you were to ask the academy coaches, I think primarily they want to create players for Aston Villa, but then another sort of level or another dynamic to that job is that they also want to create players who have good professional careers, and that is something they take reward from. And so, whether it be at Villa, I think we're in a bit of a tricky situation. Perhaps Conference League might play into whether players get opportunities this season, but and certainly which players we keep around with squad rules and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think if we're talking specifically about someone like Jayden Philippine, I would probably push to saying that unfortunately his future is probably going to lie away from Aston Villa.
Yeah, and I think Villa has got a really good history of bringing players up through the youth academy. We won't go too much further into the topic, but it's like in my lifetime, I remember seeing sort of Lee Hendry, proper Villa boy playing for Villa. I'm sure someone's going to correct me, or you're going to correct me and say, "Oh, they didn't actually start at Villa." But I'm talking about players who were with Villa from when they were young and who are, like Birmingham-born boys. And Lee Hendry, I always remember him when I was a kid. He was always my favourite player. And this was before when I was quite young. I didn't really understand the concept of homegrown heroes or anything like that. And then it was Gabby Iroegbunum came through, and then you get Jack Grealish, and then you get Jacob Ramsey, and we tend to produce players, and even players who didn't come up through our academy, the likes of sort of like James Milner, Gareth Barry, and Stuart Downing, and players who went on to better things, Benteke. We are that club, if we're being honest, that develop players, and then sort of bigger teams come in and sort of poach them when they get to a certain level. And I've always been sort of very okay with that, because when we were in the Championship and we were the big fish and we were poaching from anyone we wanted because we were that kind of club. I just think it's the hierarchy of football sometimes. So I think that's really important. And I don't really know Emery's track record when it comes to bringing youth through, but I think it's something that I'm particularly passionate about. And I would always rather a player come through the academy and shine than come from outside the club and shine. I've got absolutely no idea why. It's not my money that goes out when we pay big transfer fees. It doesn't make it any odds to me. But if I had a choice, I think I'd always pick the homegrown heroes. Already said. Let's move on from yesterday and the Walsall game, and I want to go through individual players, and I want to get the questions that we all want answered, all of the insider info, and we want to know what's going on with them. But before we touch on them, I want to talk about the ones who got away, so to speak. You'll know that a few players have obviously been released this summer, the likes of Arjun Raki and Brad Young. Arjun Raki, someone particularly that I thought was very highly rated, and has always sort of like done well on loan. Brad Young, obviously, like I say, when that game against Liverpool and just in previous appearances has always looked quite good. One of the questions that we had has actually come from Rich, who's on the podcast as well. Everyone will know Rich. He asks, was it not worth signing the likes of Young and Raki on 1-year deals so we can make some money from them instead of releasing on free transfers? Do you think there's any, or can you understand the reasoning just with your understanding of how sort of that youth system works as to why we wouldn't? Because I'm sure there's a transfer value there.
I think part of that comes from almost a respect for a person's career, in that they're a crucial point in their career. If you spend another year and you don't get the loan move that you want to attract a team to pay a fee for you, then you're in the same situation a year further down the line. You're 21, 22, and again, you're struggling to find a club. I think, in a way, you have to be cruel to be kind sometimes with these sort of delicate situations at this age, and in this age group where it's the last age group before first team football. Arjun Raki undoubtedly was highly thought of, And again, it comes back to that whole conversation about sometimes opportunity just doesn't come. And that can relate to Arden Roike's time at Aston Villa, not getting an opportunity, but it also can relate to his opportunities that have come at loan clubs, and he's not necessarily always had the chance to sell himself to a Football League club. And that's because of the troubles that certain clubs want to avoid. When he's gone down to Grimsby in the National League, if that's a playoff run, then they're playing for the future of the football club, really. A club of Grimsby's size, they need the money that comes from promotion to League Two. When he was at Stockport, the fear is relegation back to the National League. And again, when you're a lone player, one of the things I find frustrating is that managers don't put trust in these academy players, and I can understand the reasoning for that. But you kind of get a little bit stuck sometimes, and I think those are the players, Roike, Young, who have had those kind of stalling loan moves.
Yeah.
And if we're being honest, they shouldn't have been playing under 21 football last season. In an ideal world, they would have had loan moves. Obviously, Young, we know, did. And again, I think had a slightly difficult time. It began the year at Ayr, and Ayr have just sold their main striker, Dipo Akinyemi, who was Scottish Championship top goal scorer. And so it's hard to be competing with these guys, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that's in a harsh way part of the developing a career side of things, is that knowing you've got to put the hard yards in training, you've got to show that you're capable of taking a spot. And I think that helps grow a player that will have a career now at this age. I'm sure there's interest in Arden Roike. That he was on trial towards the end of last season with Leicester. He played in one of their under-21s games, and it's those sort of opportunities that potentially arise. I don't for a minute think that the Leicester opportunity will arise, but again, it's good to have that acknowledgement, and it shows that there is interest. It might be someone lower down the pyramid, it might be a League One or a League Two team, but again, it's a good base to start from. And I think the club, like I say, it can probably lean on that defence that sometimes you just have to, in a harsh way, be cruel to be kind, and let these players go and create the careers that they need to produce for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've seen loads of loan moves where players have moved on to a lower league club, Championship, League One, and they're not played. And as a Villa fan, and surely for the club, it must be so frustrating where you send a player on loan and they don't get the chance for regular football, which is the whole reason we've sent them out there. If we wanted them to sit on the bench, or we could have at least we could have done that ourselves, or could have put them in the under-21s and seen how they get on there. But no, I think you're spot on, and that's really a point of view that I've never really looked at it from, the club doing something for the player. For me, it's always sort of dollars and cents, and if we can get £1 million for Arden Roike, and it's £1 million, it's not a massive transfer fee of any. But if it keeps the lights on for a day, it keeps the lights on. So I maybe that's me projecting some personal stuff with the energy bills going up recently. But yeah, no, I completely get where you're coming from. Let's go through first, and we'll try and go through these players relatively quickly, because there's quite a few that I want to ask about, and some I want to spend more time on than others. Let's start with our mate Rico Richards, who has just come from West Brom, another, I think maybe the 20th West Brom Academy player that we've brought in the last year. What do you know about him? I'll be honest, I know absolutely nothing about him. I've never seen him play. I know that there's a good amount of hype around him. I know that a lot of other Villa fans, especially people listening, will want to know who he is, what he's about, maybe what his chances are of getting into the fold at Villa. So yeah, what do you know about him?
I see him actually, funnily enough, that we bring him up just after discussing him, but he's kind of at that Arden Reiki stage of his career. And with Mark Harrison, we've not seen, we have seen that he doesn't have a fear of bringing in someone that he's previously worked with. When I think of the way this Rico Richards deal has panned out, in that he's been released from West Brom, despite a clear recognition of talent, I see it as very similar to how Finn Azaz joined the club. I'm probably not thinking this is a signature to try and strengthen the first team in a year or two, but I see it as perhaps someone who can go out and gain recognition with a League One team on loan, make an impact, and then perhaps we can sell them on for whether it be 2, 3, 4 million, and gain some money. But in the meantime, actually help develop a player, and that's the crux of what the academy is there to do.
And for those who don't know Mark Harrison, do you want to sort of explain who he is and what he does at Villa?
So Mark Harrison is the academy manager. So he's the person who oversees all facets of development within the academy, and that ranges from academy recruitment, in that we mentioned him when we're talking about recruiting Rico Richards, to the development pathways of, if we're talking about the under-16s, under-18s. The reason it is relevant to these moves is that he was formerly at West Brom, and that
explains a lot, to be fair.
That's quite an easy connection to make. But I think this is something actually that is quite common in academy football, is that you see players at other clubs, and then when you move job, if the opportunity comes to perhaps do a favour is probably the wrong term, but if you can help them out by giving them a profile to go on loan, as I say, to a football league club, he knows that there is talent. I mean, you don't play Championship football for West Brom, albeit a small number of appearances, but you don't play Championship football for West Brom if you aren't talented. And so there will definitely be clubs that are interested in taking Rico Richards on loan. I think we saw that from Greg Evans when the move happened, is that there will be clubs interested in taking him on loan. And so I think the easiest way to put it is Mark Harrison trusts his instinct. We've seen other players come in. I mentioned Finn Azaz, and that's gone brilliantly so far. But there are other players within the academy system who have also made the move. Tim Iroegbunum was another. He made the move around the same time as Mark Harrison from West Brom. And again, he's now one of the players that we're talking about as the closest to making that step to the first team.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? Like I say, this is a massive fact-finding mission for me. I don't know half as much about the youth setup and how it works as I'd like. What kind of salary, or what kind of position would these guys be in their career? Because you talk about helping the player out and helping develop them. What are they sort of like on? I know they won't be on the big bucks, but like relative to other young players of their age, how are they? Is this for them like a make or break? Is this a chance for them to earn some money in case football doesn't work out? Is the motivation for them? It's like, well, you're on the minimum, but you're fighting for your life in football. How does it work financially for them?
I think financially is very difficult to talk about. Unfortunately, I don't have much information when it comes to what wages these guys are on. I can't imagine that it will be huge if you're coming in as a free agent from West Brom, for example. But I think it's more to do with the trust, for example, that Mark Harrison has in what he's seen of that player previously, and what he will be getting feedback from scouts, for example, in that when Carney Chukwuemeka moved on to Chelsea and people balked at the fee a little bit, some of the discussion I had was around opportunity cost, and you're buying the chance to develop a player who's worth so much more, and in a slightly lesser fashion, this is us doing the same thing. Is we're kind of owning the
Potential.
opportunity to create someone who's maybe going to sell for 5 million, 10 million, if things go well in a year or two.
Yeah, brilliant. And like I said, the only thing I have to go on for youth players is a career mode in FIFA. So I know exactly how much they all get, but I don't know what the rest of them are on. So yeah, that's brilliant. Well, we're all excited to see Rico Richards and see what he can do. Like I say, I wanted to go through some of the players that we've had questions about. If I'm being honest, this podcast is almost just for me because there's so many players I'm interested in. I want to know what's going on. But one of the big players that we've had loads and loads of questions about since we've put this out has been your man Louie Barry. Obviously, we know he another West Brom academy product but he came to Villa via Barcelona. Loads and loads and loads of expectation on Louie Barry. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, he scored that goal against Liverpool, and at that point, his stock with the Villa fans was as high as you could imagine. And since then, we know that he's been on loan. Things haven't really worked out that well. Like I say, we've even had some questions on it. From Twitter as well. We've had people saying, does Barry still have, from Matt C, so does Barry still have a chance, or is that just not going to work? We've had loads of questions, pretty much to the exact same tune. Tell us about Louie Barry. What's the situation with him? Where's he at career-wise? And do you reckon there's any place for him in that first team ever?
I think the interesting thing is the context in which Louie Barry's stock rose, and it's almost a bit of a unicorn in that you don't ever really have the situation in which Louie Barry shot to the front of the Villa Academy scene, if you like. The context that surrounded him playing in that FA Cup game against Liverpool is very, very unique. That won't have happened, if ever, to anyone else. And so, in a way, I think he's kind of had a bit of an elevated position within the academy, almost a bit unfairly. And I don't mean that in the sense of that he didn't deserve that, because scoring a goal against Liverpool at the age that he did is remarkable. But I mean unfairness in the sense of it's almost a bit of pressure a bit too soon. You don't have that goal. You take away that goal against Liverpool and you can go about your daily work in the academy. Let's not forget that Louie Barry was a focal point of that FA Youth Cup winning side. And so you can argue that he deserved that sort of hype that came around a lot of those players within that FA Youth Cup winning side, solely down to those performances. In terms of his career, I think part of it, or part of the reason that we're not talking about is Louie Barry ready for first team action right now. We're not seeing him in action in a pre-season friendly at Warsaw, is because he's had to do some career maintenance, I think is probably the best way to term it, is get to grips with men's football, whether that be playing through the middle as a 9, or what we now see him more frequently as someone who's utilised as a bit of an inside forward last season at Salford. So playing in what we'd probably call the number 11 role in the left wing. And so that's stylistically a bit of a change from how his academy development went. He was pretty much always a central striker.
How did he get on at Salford last year? Because I know his numbers weren't great, and he was on the bench for a period. So how was that?
That's it. Is people will always look at the numbers, and I think that's the easiest way to gauge someone's idea of success. But I think going beyond that, in a team, playing a big part in a team that were a penalty shootout away from a playoff final, his success and being a trusted part of that team, having a good number of starts, is significant for Louie Barry's career. In the context that we're talking to him about, in that he's at this bit of a crossroads, we don't really know what to make of what's going to happen with him. I think, if I'm being completely honest, I don't see much of a pathway for him, in that his position is one that immediately comes with pressure when you're talking about playing Premier League football. It takes 3-4 games without a goal for people to start talking. We've seen it with Leon Bailey coming through, and how quickly that sort of positive attitude has turned to, right, we need something now. And so it's a position that clubs tend to recruit heavily in. And I think that's the biggest barrier to Louie Barry's prospects at Villa. But in that, it again relates back to what we've kind of discussed so far, is that not every player is going to make it at Aston Villa. Part of the remit of the academy is developing players who will go on and have good careers. And I don't doubt that Louie Barry is going to have, at worst, a good Football League career.
I'm gonna put you on the spot for every single player that I'm gonna ask you about, and I need a Roman Emperor's thumbs up or thumbs down. Louie Barry, does he have a future at Villa?
Thumbs down.
Thumbs down.
Probably not.
Louie Barry is done. Really interesting. Like you say, a lot of pressure on him. I think because he came from Barcelona as well.
Yeah.
Same with Traore. When you come from a club of that size and stature, you're always swimming against the tide. But you need to have that kind of guile, and you need to have that confidence in yourself, and more importantly, you need the ability to go forward and do what you need. He's very slight. It's hard to adjust to the men's game. Maybe he'll fill out and work on that. But I'm with you. I think Louie Barry is going to be too far behind in the pecking order. And I think we also have to bear in mind what Villa are trying to do now. If you look at the caliber of the signings that we've got, that we're making this summer, with the Torres and Tielemans and maybe Diaby coming in, and who else? Who knows who else may be coming in? I've heard Doku as well today. So it's going to be even harder for these kids to break through. But I think if you look at somewhere like Man City, for example, they're really, really good at integrating youth players. They've got what's his name?
Cole Palmer.
Cole Palmer, yeah. Obviously, Cole Palmer scored the winning goal in the Euros final and the 21s final. The other one who plays right back.
Rico Lewis,
that's one. Man City, obviously a massive team at the moment, the best players in the world, but they still managed to integrate youth players, and I think that's a testament to how good their academy is. Not to mention the ones that they let go, the likes of Sancho and many others. I like that style. For me, I would love to have that kind of integration, 2-3 youth academy players in the squad at all time, and Villa have got a good history of that. So maybe we'll see. All right, I want a very, very quick, let's do a 30-second segment. Now that Carney Chukwuemeka is gone, what is Caleb Chukwuemeka's future at Villa? Does he have one, or was he brought in just to appease Carney?
I think the more and more it develops with his performances, I think it starts to sound a bit more like that was the case. Yeah. The good news is for him in terms of his career, although he had a bit of an underwhelming loan move at Crawley last season, there was an obligation to buy, so I would expect that to go through. That gives him a bit of security in that you can sort of plan ahead and sort of settle at a club and focus on how things are going to attribute at that club. It's an interesting one because he certainly has attributes that are more than usable at that level, and I was a bit excited about him when he first came in. He scored a hat-trick against West Brom in Premier League 2, and so there were certainly things that looked positive. He obviously made his first team debut against Barrow in the League Cup, and again, that's significant. You don't get that opportunity if you're not talented. I think the biggest thing for him is finding somewhere where he can consistently play games. Last year was a bit of in and out. Again, the coverage of loan players is not great at Football League clubs, and so it's not clear whether that was down to injury or just not selection. But yeah, as I say, the positive thing for him is that he's got a permanent home where he can sort of settle down and you can build something without having that sort of tag of, oh, he's the Aston Villa player playing at Crawley.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think from what I've seen of Caleb, I don't think he's quite at that level, but definitely exciting when he came in. And yeah, best of luck to him at Crawley. I think he's been painted with a certain brush after Carney left. It's kind of not his fault. He's just he's been doing his best, but best of luck to him. Next, this is a player that I was so excited about, and I still am. I haven't personally seen anything that makes me think that he's not the player that I think he can be, or not the player that I think he is, or the player that I think he can be. It's our mate Kessler Hayden. When he first came through, I was absolutely buzzing about him. I think Villa, one of the main positions that we need to strengthen at the moment is a right back. We had a keep, sell, loan show earlier on in the transfer window, and when it came to Matty Cash, I said, me personally, I said I would sell him, look to bring in a sort of really strong right back, and then bring in Kessler Hayden as the backup, and get some experience and play some of the games in maybe the cups or in the Europa Conference League. I got absolutely battered in the comments. And like I say, I can only go off what I've seen of Kessler Hayden. He's always impressed me. I'm happy to concede either way. You tell me, what is Kane Kessler Hayden about? Does he have it? Does he not? Is he going to... is there any route for him? Roman Emperor, thumbs up, thumbs down. Is there any route for him into the Villa first team?
I think it's a big season for him to have hopefully a full season on loan at Plymouth. Obviously, the past couple of seasons have been somewhat stop-start for him in that he had a move to Huddersfield, which broke down. He then came back and was back part of the under-21s. I love Kane Kessler Hayden. I love his play style. He's the modern fullback in that he's elusive and he can play that inverted central midfield role. I think again, if we were talking about Aston Villa, it's going to be tough for him because again we're talking about a position where the club will happily drop 25-30 million pounds on a player.
That's true, but we're not particularly blessed in that position. And we had Matty Cash, Ashley Young's gone to Everton. It's a position that we need depth. I know was it Ben Christen?
Ben Christen.
He played at left back, and Bogart played at right back yesterday. These players, again, I can only go off what I've seen. Really, really good players, but I don't know if Bogard is at the level of Kessler Hayden, if he has the experience of him. Is he? If we had to bring or start the season with only Matty Cash, we haven't brought anyone else in, would you rather have him in than Kane Kessler Hayden or not?
Lamar Bogard is not a right back. He's somewhat of a utility player in that he can play a number of positions along the back line.
Sure.
But that's part of his promise, that part of the potential that he has in that he's capable to play a number of positions. Thinking about Kane Kessler Hayden, certainly when we saw that he was part of the match day squad or travelled with the squad for that 2-2 draw against Man United at home, I think a lot of fans would have said, yes, this is the guy. He's an exciting footballer, so I can see why fans want him to be successful. Not only just because he's an academy player, but he plays an exciting brand of football.
What
I
was the
think
game he played against Man City? And I
for
can't remember.
Swindon.
Swindon, yeah, and he was
Yeah,
absolutely electric in that
yeah,
game.
yeah, and things like that only benefit him in that was on ITV on a Friday night. There would have been millions watching, and I think the sort of famous clip was he nutmegged someone and went
Yeah,
on a bit of a run, and again you're kind of thinking, wow, I'd love to see this guy get a bit of a run in the first team squad, and so
yeah.
we
I
can
mean,
see a little bit of that excitement.
I was certainly watching, and I've never watched a game of his where I wasn't impressed, and I think
Hmm.
that's part of, even at every level. So what does he? What is he missing then? Because you say you don't know about the route into Villa, because we're always going to bring in top talent. But that doesn't mean there's no route, there's no gateway for the academy, because then there would be no point in having it. For me, you've got to look where it's possible to bring in players who are of the right level. What does he need then to get into the first team
So I think, firstly, would
or the
be
squad? Sorry, not the actual
yeah.
first 11, but
I think uh, some of the stuff that I see coming back about his loan moves is that there seems to be some talk about attitude, and I can't really comment on that. The stuff that I see is unquestionably good. You watch him for the under-21s, and again, the commitment is there. He's doing the job that you would expect of somebody who really shouldn't be playing under-21 football.
yeah.
I think people would probably like to see a bit more defensive responsibility or rigidity, I think is probably the way to term it, in that yes, he's got all the attacking attributes, but I think the immediate thing people think about with fullbacks is, can they defend and can they be part of a
Has he
back
got
four?
like Trent Alexander-Arnold
Yeah,
syndrome? Very good
yeah,
going forward.
absolutely. And that's a good comparison to make, in that I think people instantly think, well, he's not part of a team that gets 20 clean sheets a season or something like that, and he can't defend. I think there's been numerous occasions where I've watched him in the Championship, and he's more than capable at his job. I think the main thing for him is we will get a better picture after this season. He will need consistent game time, and that possibly links into something that happened yesterday, because I believe he was injured in a pre-season friendly after a heavy tackle. So hopefully that isn't too bad. It was just precaution, and he will start the season fit. But yeah, I think we need to see him have a full season of being trusted by a manager, um, and then we'll have a clearer picture maybe in the summer of next season.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, fingers crossed for him. I've been a big fan of him for a long time.
Me too.
So what are we doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
I, can I go in
I'm
order?
not letting you sit on the fence today, Charlie. I'm going to need an answer from you.
I'm going to say thumbs down, just because I think the way that the first team is heading is a bit financially motivated, and I think we will probably see a first team fullback signed this summer, and I think that will block his pathway a little bit.
Fair enough. You can't argue with that. Let's go for someone who's a little bit easier. Hopefully, we can get this done a little bit quicker. Tim Iroegbunum. That's how I pronounce it. I don't know how everyone else pronounces it. I mean, look, he's on everyone's radar. Had a season with QPR in the Championship. Very, very, very highly rated there from what I've seen. All the Ars fans are, they were super impressed with him. Obviously, he's still very young. A lot to develop in his game. There's two things for me, because from what I've heard, there doesn't seem to be a massive risk in terms of his ability. Obviously, he's going to get better as a player. He's still a kid. My big question is, Villa currently have Douglas Luiz, John McGinn, Jacob Ramsey, Bubakar Kamara, Yuri Tielemans, who can all play in the centre as a centre mid. Obviously, there are some players who are a bit older than others, the likes of John McGinn. Douglas Luiz is a player who you can see. I could see him leaving, going to a Chelsea or going to an AC Milan or a Barcelona or something like that. But for now, as it stands, it doesn't really seem like there's a route in for him in terms of the opposition and people who are already there. What are your thoughts on Tim Iroegbunum really quickly in terms of like his ability? But let's also get a thumbs up, thumbs down. Can he batter his way through the established players already and find a place in that first team squad this season?
I think we will certainly know more by the end of the transfer window. I love that this season we have the extra opportunity of European football, and so if we can get in a good position following the playoff, if we qualify, but then secondly, if we're in a good position in the group stage, he's someone who will be, for me, have sort of first reserve on substitution minutes, perhaps even starting games if we can qualify with a couple of games left to go, for example. So I would be a big advocate for him staying around this season. I'm a big advocate for him having as much exposure to minutes as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, do you have for example, any worries about the competition that he's already got there, all the names that I've already mentioned? What do you think?
Yes and no. In that two of the players that fit that depth chart currently don't play that central midfield role. John McGinn's used in that bit of I call it a bit of a wing fielder, the right midfield role, and Ramsey used on the left. So if that continues to be the case, then Douglas and Kamara can be your starters, and then perhaps if we see some rotation, then Tielemans can drop in, and then, like I say, in the example that we gave of Conference League football, then that would leave, for me, Tim Iroegbunum with the perfect opportunity to have some good exposure to men's football at a high level. Again, it might take an injury or something like that. Injuries happen. And so if he's around at the club this season, part of the squad, then it only takes someone to get a 2-3 week knock for him to get a little run, whether that be in a Conference League game or something like that. And that can be the difference maker for someone who's in the infancy of their exposure to first team football with Villa.
Yeah, I think he's one to look out for. A lot of people are very interested in him, and I, for one, am as well. I'd love to see him integrated. Keep seeing stuff with like links to Weston Kenny and Tyler Adams, other players who kind of play his position. I'd much rather give Tim a go. He looks really impressive. Love to have him a part of the first team. Right, we're going to go on to the big one now, because anyone who's ever watched the show before and has ever seen me in the Villa Park podcast will know that I'm an advocate. I'm the head of the fan club for one particular player. Have been for quite a few seasons now. I've been banging the drum for this man, Cameron Archer. Before I ask you your opinion, I will tell you mine. He is, for me, the most natural finisher we have at the club by a country mile. I think he's got everything he needs to have, at least he deserves a chance in the Premier League, starting games, I believe, not necessarily ahead of Ollie, but sometimes there are games which might suit him better than Ollie. Again, a few chances, for example, I feel like Cameron Archer, I'd back Cameron Archer to pick a one chance in a game, maybe more than Ollie Watkins. And I know that seems a bit, he's never done it at that level, and it's very premature. But every single time I watch him, he's just synonymous with goals. Every time I watch him, he's super impressive. And I've been banging the drum for this kid for a long time. My big fear is he didn't play yesterday. And a lot of people say, oh, well, he had the Euros. So did Aaron Ramsey, who's another player we'll get onto in a second. And he obviously started that game. What's going on with Cameron Archer? What do you think of him as a player? I'm sure you've watched him a lot more than I have at Middlesbrough, Norwich, Preston North End over his loan spells over the last couple of years. Maybe even for Villa, that game against Chelsea, I was at that game, the header he scored. What do you think of him as a player? And B, what's going on with him? Why didn't he play yesterday? Is he going away on loan again this season? And is there any route for him? Roman Emperor, thumbs up, thumbs down. Is there any route for him into the team this year or ever?
Huge thumbs up. I pretty much would echo everything that you said there, in that every time he is challenged with an opportunity to further himself, he delivers. So whether that was getting a loan move to the Championship at Preston, being his first taste of league football, in that Solihull Moors was a slightly different opportunity. He scored goals. He's gone to Middlesbrough. He scored goals when he got his opportunity at Villa, and no one really knew what to expect from him. Hat-trick against Barrow. And so he's always delivered when given an opportunity. The reason we wouldn't have seen him yesterday is definitely down to the fact that the Euro final was only, was it last week? Feels like ages, but I think it was last week. Aaron Ramsey pulled out through injury, so that would be the reason that we saw Aaron Ramsey yesterday and not Cameron Archer. But I think certainly Cameron Archer, I think, will benefit from the fact that it's hard to buy someone who is prepared to be a number 2 striker. It's very, very difficult to buy someone who will meet the capability expectations and also be happy to be a number 2. So I think he will benefit from that. I would not expect him to go on loan this season. I would expect him to be around. We're going to be playing more games. We'll be expecting to go further in cup competitions. So he would absolutely be the perfect person to have around to fill in those minutes where we want to remove Ollie Watkins from the pitch.
So I completely agree with you. Let's talk. You mentioned his under 21 Euro win, 5 matches, 2 goals, 1 assist. His numbers, goals per game for Middlesbrough last season was absolutely insane. Michael Carrick had a lot of faith in him. I can't, add to what you've already said. Just everywhere he goes, he produces. And I know he had, was it Solihull Moors where his first loan where he didn't have a great time, and a lot of people kind of come back to that, and I just, what was he, 16, 17, even younger, like, yeah, it's such a young age to be producing. But I think so let's track back a little bit. Why didn't he play yesterday? Do you know that? Has he been rested? Because in my mind, Aaron Ramsey played, I thought, okay, well, Cameron Archer's getting ready to go on loan, they don't want to injure him. What do you know about that, if anything?
Yeah, it'll 100% be down to just allowing him some time off after the Euros. He's not been back in pre-season yet with Villa. So it'll be a similar situation to the other players who have been away on international duty. So whether that be Tyrone Mings or Boubacar Kamara or players of that ilk who have been away on international duty, Archer will in fact actually probably get a little bit more time in that his international duty finished a week before the players came back to pre-season. So I think we will probably see him go to America.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I say, I would be shocked to see him go on loan unless something significant happens or there's a change of plan in that we're going to play a different formation or something like that. But I can't see a situation that would arise in which Cameron Archer isn't around the squad and isn't a part of the Europa Conference League squad, for example, the 11s, or whether it be from the bench. And I don't doubt that he's going to score goals for us.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think we were talking earlier about the fear of the one that got away. I don't have that kind of fear with anyone as the same way I do with Cameron Archer, because I put good money on the fact that if he goes anywhere in the Premier League, he'll score goals. I would love to see him. All I want is for him to get a chance. I think he's earned it. Maybe it doesn't work out for him. Maybe the Prem is a level too high for him. I doubt it after his performance against Chelsea a couple of years back. But yeah, so big thumbs up for him. Is that obviously you've given him a glowing description? Is that a thumbs up that you would like him to integrate, or do you think he will actually start playing first team football?
I think he will. As I say, I think the way things are at Villa at the moment is that it's a low priority position for us to recruit in. So I would be surprised if we sign someone who's going to rival Ollie Watkins, and so that fits Cameron Archer's position within the squad perfectly.
Do you think it is a low priority position? So you've got Ollie Watkins here. Do you think it is a low priority position? Because I thought at times last season, because obviously we've got Duran as well. We haven't spoken about him, but if Watkins had got injured last season at the crunch time where we went on our great run, do you think obviously Villa would have struggled with no striker? And with Watkins, we only have the option to play one way, really. Do you think that it will be the case where Villa won't sign a striker? Because I've seen us linked to quite a few. Dusan Vlahovic before he was linked to PSG. Obviously, that looks like that move is going to happen possibly next week. But we have been linked to strikers. Do you think that we won't sign one and that it will just be Watkins and Cameron Archer?
I say low priority in the sense that it's not the most urgently required signing. There are certainly positions within the first team squad that I would say require more urgent care than us to sign a number 2 striker who's going to displace Cameron Archer in the depth chart. It's hard to say. I would be shocked though that if we go and spend big on someone, and then it comes back to that same conversation that are you really going to go and sign someone who's happy to come and be number 2 and is a competent goal scorer? Those are probably the hardest strikers to come across because you're talking about your Wout Weghorst to Man United or something like that, and we saw how that played out.
Yeah, you can't argue with that. I think maybe it's competition as well. It was only what was it, 2 years ago when we brought in Danny Ings to be direct competition to Ollie Watkins. Obviously, it didn't work out for Ollie Watkins, and he actually kind of thrives off having no competition. Ollie Watkins, I think he kind of suits better knowing that he's going to play every week. He doesn't have that maybe added pressure. But obviously, my opinion, I'd love to see Cameron Archer get some more game time. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Duran. Every time I've seen him, he's looked fine. I think it's harsh on him because he only gets sort of like
raw
10 minutes.
Is the word, I think.
Say again, sorry?
I think he's raw in that you can see that there are things there that, like, you can see why he's been identified, but I think he needs time to sort of establish himself and sort of understand his role within the team, for example.
Yeah, I agree. And from my opinion, I don't see any world where I'd rather start Duran than Cameron Archer. Right? No. Like that. And that's what baffled me. But I get sending him out last season on loan, getting him some experience. He wasn't going to play a lot in a Villa shirt. And the same for Duran. He didn't play minutes. I'd be surprised if he actually did 90 combined, all of the games that he had. But Cameron Archer, I think we're all agreed on that. I think you struggle to find a Villa fan who's not interested to see him. Let's do the last player before we finish off with just a few questions that we've had in. Aaron Ramsey. Obviously, we know his brother Jacob has come. What did they call him? The England official Twitter. They didn't call him Jacob Ramsey. They called him something else.
JJ and AJ probably.
Yeah, probably something like that.
Something like that. I don't know.
The disrespect for Jacob Ramsey was crazy, considering he was captain at the under 21s. Yeah. They got the name wrong, and then they called him a defender. So yeah, he's had a lot of disrespect. But a player who is very, very highly rated, and actually even before Jacob Ramsey came through at Villa, I heard that his brother was the one to look out for
Mm.
When he had made his first appearance in the Championship, Jacob Ramsey, I heard, well, he's got a brother in there who's even better than he is. Jacob is obviously, proven to be a revelation towards the back end of the season specifically. He's done some incredible stuff, a player that everyone loves. He's our homegrown hero already that we have in the squad. What is the story with Aaron Ramsey? Is he as good? Is he better? Is he worse? Is there any route for him into the first team this year?
I think Aaron Ramsey is another one who could benefit from the Europe quota. He is at that stage where you're talking about how are we going to give this guy an opportunity. And I think, again, similarly as we've had the conversations for Tim, Iroegbunum and for Cameron Archer, I think there will be opportunities that arise for Aaron Ramsey. Funnily, I think he may even be the beneficiary of his brother's injury right now, in that he'll get a run in pre-season. And if that goes well, that who knows, that could even lead to a start on the opening day against Newcastle, for example. He plays a similar role. He's slightly more diminutive in that he does more of the things that you would expect to see from a 10, whereas Jacob Ramsey is a bit more sort of all action 8. He's got the technical ability as well as the sort of running power. Aaron Ramsey is a bit different in that he's more. I'm trying to think of a comparison in terms of player.
He likes a final pass from what I've seen. He had a good chemistry with Cameron Archer and Middlesbrough. He's a playmaker. Yeah,
he's a bit of a right place, right time player, I think, as well. In that he pops up with a key pass in a counter attack or the 30-yard carry crossing the halfway line in a counter attack from a corner. In fact, we saw that with one of his goals for Middlesbrough last season, in that he carried the ball a long way from a counter attack and then finished it without second thought. Yeah. So I don't doubt that he's got the technical ability. I like that Villa gave him some trust to play yesterday. I think it will be interesting to see what happens. As I say, he might benefit from his brother's injury. He might benefit from the European quota that we need. We could very well end in a position where he doesn't leave on loan and we see him get some minutes in the Conference League.
Yeah, brilliant. I think we'd all be excited to see Aaron Ramsey. For one, I'd love to see him. I know that he played with Cameron Archer at Middlesbrough the second half of last season. I really liked their chemistry, their link up. It worked brilliant from what I saw, and that might work in both their favours to have already played with each other at such a high level. I would say maybe the level could be harder than some of the conference games that will come up against. So fingers crossed for him. Right, let's finish off with a couple of questions, and then we'll finish off with. I'm going to throw some names at you, and I just want a yes or no for Villa future. No explanation, no deep dive into their history. I want to get through. There's so many, players of interest in the academy. We'd be here for 3-4 days if we were going to go through all of them. Rich has asked, who does he think out of the current under 18 and 19s has the makings of getting into the first team picture?
Okay, so I've got some thoughts on this one. This is a good question. If we're talking players that played for the under-18s last season, Hayden Young, but I think that's a bit of a cop-out answer because he's already been in and around the first team, so I'll give you another couple. Omari Kellyman. I think this will be Kellyman's season. In that he's made that step from under-18s to under-21s. He's had that recognition from the first team. He's had plenty of sessions training with the first team towards the end of last season. He is really exciting. I will be keenly tracking what he does with the under-21s. I expect him to be central to what they're doing this season. And who
was that? Sorry, I completely missed the name.
Omari Kellyman.
Omari Kelly, yeah. I have, again, through my absolutely limited experience of watching youth football, I have heard of obviously Young as well, Caden Young, Murray Kelly. We actually have one of the questions that we have from our own Kevin Tyler is Rory Wilson. What are his chances of making it into the first team?
I think the conversation surrounding Rory Wilson is a bit unfair in the same way the conversation that surrounded Louie Barry was a bit unfair. He comes over with this big reputation from Rangers, and I think people are expecting a bit too much too soon for him.
Sure.
I see people talking about surprise that he's not involved in first team squads. They would like to see him in the Cup, for example, next season, that sort of thing. I think that's going to be a bit too soon. We're talking about someone who came in, and this was his first season with the club. He was playing majority under 18s football. It's rare that you will see someone go from under 18s with minimal under 21s football straight to the first team. What you can see from him is the fundamentals are great. His ball striking, his understanding of finishing is really good. I would like to see more of that in the under 21s this season, and that's what we will get with him. He will be the starting striker for the under 21s. In terms of where we see that going, development isn't linear, so it's hard to put a specific tag on what to expect from him. But I want to see continuing development in the under 21s, and then perhaps next season we can talk about whether he's ready to go out on loan or perhaps ready for some minutes in next season's friendly at Walsall, for example, or something like that.
Brilliant. All right, so I am going to chuck some names at you, and I just want a yes or a no. Future at Villa, you ever see them getting in or around the first team squad? Let's start with Bogard, Lamar Bogard.
Yes.
Yes. Ben Critton.
This is a tough one.
It is a tough one, and if you want to elaborate very quickly, you can.
I'm gonna say no, but this is more down to his injury record.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about footballing more, I love Ben Critton as a player, so I would love to see him successful at Villa.
Brilliant. Josh Feeney.
I think this will shock a few people, but I'm going to say no.
Wow, that is a big one. Josh Feeney, again, from what I know, is highly rated. A lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And me saying that doesn't mean he won't. Absolutely, but I think this is more down again, sort of thinking of the difficulties that centre backs tend to face in breakthrough, and I'm thinking again, it's hard for a defender to get opportunity. Particularly when they come through so young. I think Josh Feeney still has some filling out to do. Again, I think everyone would love to see him develop. Yeah. I think if we draw it back to just simply yes or no, I'm hedging my bets a little bit and saying no.
Wow, let's move on. That's very interesting. That's a really bold take. I assume this is the brother of Dominic Revan, who now plays for Barnet, if I'm not wrong. Sebastian Revan. Will he follow his brother to lower league?
I think we will probably see him get a move. Well, they gave him a 1-year contract extension, so we'll. And I've seen talk of a loan move to League Two. So I'm going to say no at Villa, but again, he's one of those that I would expect to have a good EFL career following things at Villa.
Brilliant. Finn Azaz.
No.
I'm not spoken about Finn Azaz.
Yeah. The straight answer would be no. But again, that's just simply down to how stacked we are in that position that he plays. I'm half expecting there to be some movement towards a permanent move, probably to Plymouth.
Okay.
As the transfer window progresses. I think that's quite a lazy expectation, but I think it's also quite realistic in that it makes sense for all parties.
I'm loving this. This is brilliant. I'm putting you on the spot, reading off names and seeing where you're going with them. Amari Kellyman. I know you've already talked about him, and you said how much you like him. What do you think? Future at Villa or no?
I think yes. Again, it comes back to that same statement about development isn't linear. But I think what we've seen from Omari Kellyman is really exciting. And if we're talking about physicality, he's tall. Once he fills out, he'll be.
He's quite slender at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, he'll be a specimen once he fills out. And yeah, I think if you were to push me for a yes or no, I'd say yes.
Brilliant. Tommy O'Reilly. I've seen him around.
I love Tommy O'Reilly. I'm gonna say no, but that's a difficult no.
No, Charlie, come on. Tommy.
So again, it's simply down to more to do with his play style being a more diminutive 10, and I think that style of player is kind of becoming a bit unfashionable, in that most teams don't really have time or don't have that dedication to play a player who benefits from balls into their feet and rolling defenders. Time will tell. I'm hoping he maybe gets a loan move this season. Again, he's someone who could even feature in the Europa Conference League, so I'll look stupid if that happens. But I think if we're talking long term, I would probably say no, just due to barriers.
And finally, Mr. Hayden Young.
Hayden Young, yes. I think we might see some cup minutes and Conference League minutes for him this season.
See, that's interesting because at the start of the podcast, you talked about how tough it was for academy players to sort of get into any sort of first team, and you know, the low percentage of players that actually make it. And of those, I think you said maybe yes to 5 or 6 of you know, of all the players that we've spoken about so far. It's quite a high ratio. So is that just a reflection of what you think of the academy itself, or these players in particular?
I think it's a reflection of how their play styles fit into what we're trying to do as a team currently. Mm-hmm. So Hayden Young, for example, can be that sort of second striker, the role that Bailey has been playing. And we saw him play it yesterday against Warsaw. He can be that live wire on the right side. So thinking about him, thinking about Lamar Bogard, he's someone who has a high level of technical security.
Yeah,
and football maturity, I think, as well, is he plays with a level of maturity that perhaps sometimes you don't see in a player coming through an academy. That's brilliant. So those are the things that make me say yes for those players. Is it's more a case of do their styles suit what we're trying to do as a club currently.
Yeah, I think that's a massive part of it as well. You know, can they play Emery's system, because it's a very demanding, very technical system. And I think you even see players, for example, Matty Cash. I see him struggle sometimes just towards the end of the season when he came back in after his injury with Poland, and I think that passing around the back, I think because he's not left foot and he's on that right side and he has to kind of go back, sometimes he struggles with it, and it's not because he's a bad player, it's just the system. So yeah, really interesting. Finally, is there anyone in the youth academy that can save us from Olsen? Is there anyone who can come up and take that number two goalkeeper position away from him? Because I think many Villa fans would love to never see Olsen in a Villa shirt again if we could avoid it.
Goalkeeper is a really interesting position at the moment. We have quite a few that I think the club rate quite highly. Vuyami Sinisalo, the talk is that after featuring yesterday, he'll go on loan to Exeter, which I think will be a good loan move for him. Sinisalo, I would see as probably the natural progressor into that number 2 spot. Perhaps that's next season. If we're in Europe again, for example, that will be a good opportunity. Thinking further beyond that, so there are quite a few goalies. We've just had Olivier Zoich playing in the under-19 Euros. He's captain of Poland under-19s.
Yep.
James Wright was on the bench yesterday. Philip Marshall played the first hour. and Philip Marshall comes back with good reviews from Gateshead. He's been on there a couple of times on loan.
Yeah.
And then if we're talking even further down the line, Sam Proctor is currently the under-16s goalie. I know he is massively rated within the England setup and with Villa.
Okay.
And so it'll be interesting to see whether he maybe makes some steps towards the under-18s this season. But Sam Proctor is a name to keep an eye on.
I am baffled. I have no idea how you keep all this information in your head about all of these youth academy players. I think in terms of questions about players, that's it for me. But I can't tell you actually how much I love this podcast. I've done loads over the last few years with with the Villa Park Pod, and I've got to admit I actually think this is one of my favourites because I just sitting back and learning about stuff I have absolutely no idea about, and you never, like you said at the start of the podcast, you never really get to hear about these set up. There's not really a massive light shine on it. I will definitely be keeping an eye now that I know who these players are, who I'm looking out for, who I'm discarding. I think sometimes when you just don't know what you don't know, you kind of put it to one side. But I'm definitely going to be keeping up with it. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, how do people, other than going to the game themselves, how do people keep up with the youth academy football? That you've mentioned the Premier League 2 already. How can people get involved and watch that if they do want to keep up to date?
So it's tough. The club paywall it, and so that is something I've been quite strongly opposed to, in that I think a lot of clubs who have quite a tradition of academy football make things available either for less or for free. I know Leeds have streamed games on Twitter and YouTube, and simple things like that allow fans to have and be a part of the academy a bit more. Beyond that, not to sort of give away my secret, but a lot of the stuff that I do is using the apps that are out there. So the Premier League app actually is really informative when it comes to academy games. They have a live ticker for each under 21s and under 18s game, where you can see the teams. You'll get goals and assists, you'll get yellow cards, things like that, and that's really useful to use. In terms of what Villa do, so again, under 21s games are available on Villa TV Plus for a fee. But even then, it's I will try and put out when I see streams are available. So, for example, Crystal Palace do a really good job. They stream every under 18 home game and under 21 game.
So when Villa play Palace, you know that you can go to Palace.
Exactly. So you can buy a match pass with Palace for something like $2.99, $3.99, and you'll be able to watch the under-18s play against Palace. Again, it's really down to the individual clubs. One of the things that really annoys me, actually, thinking about coverage of under-21s, is that Premier League broadcast restrictions often prevent clubs from streaming games. And so that's if... so a lot of Premier League 2 games are played on Friday nights. If there's a Friday night football game live on Sky, you can't broadcast a game at the same time. And so it's stupid little rules like that prevent you from being able to watch a game live. And then it's season ticket holders get free tickets, I believe, to Bodymoor Heath. Again, annoyingly difficult to access. And then the FA Youth Cup games will be at Villa Park, as well as there tends to be 4 or 5 under-21s games at Villa Park a season, and those are always really good to go down and watch.
Well, we've got a lovely segue here. If you can't watch any of the games or through any of those mediums that Charlie's just mentioned, you can always keep up to date with what's happening on his Twitter page. Charlie, would you like to do a quick plug and let people know where they can find you on Twitter?
So if you can follow on Academy AVFC, I will. I'm generally covering most games. The information is is basic, but I think it's more than the club do, like we said, and yeah, and that'll include videos when I get access to them. Some of that stuff means trawling through other clubs' websites for highlights. Some are better than others, and but yeah, I'll post clips when I get them, post match information when I get it, that sort of stuff, and as well as the little tidbits that the club won't talk about in that, whether that's England youth selections or international youth selections. There's not been much talk about Olivier Zeitz, for example. That sort of stuff, and I think that's really good at keeping fans invested in the progression of the players in the academy.
I am going to call you out there because you've completely undersold your page, so I'm going to have to do it properly. I'll be honest, and I'll say that Charlie's Twitter page is the only place where I really consume information about the youth academy. That's from retweeting the youth academy players themselves. People that I wouldn't even know are on Twitter to follow. He retweets all of their stuff, pictures, in like really good analysis of what's happened in the games, players to look out for, and what's happened there. So 100%. Please go and give him a follow. He's already got 11,500 followers, which absolutely shits on our Twitter numbers. So make sure you follow us as well. But he's at Academy AVFC. Yeah, mate, this has been quality. I've absolutely loved this. We would love to have you back on at another point. If there are any developments, any signings, any updates maybe throughout the season as to how we're getting on in the Premier League 2. If we haven't scared you off on this one.
Yeah, without being a bit in the know, because I know that's quite trendy on
ITK.
ITK. Yeah, there will be some stuff that I think fans will want to discuss. So, yeah, it would be great to come back on and talk about the stuff when it officially happens.
Brilliant. Well, thank you guys all for listening. Thank you, Charlie, for coming on. It's been a pleasure to have you. Yeah, please tune in for more stuff. And remember, follow the Villa.
Cheers. See ya.
Mate, thank you.